The mess hall buzzed with the usual midday noise trays, clattering boots stomping over sticky tile and voices bouncing off metal walls like trapped echoes, and in the middle of it all, Private Ethan Cole stood tall for no reason other than his own. Confidence, freshly shaved head gleaming under fluorescent lights, and a smirk playing on his face as he stared at the line of cooks behind the counter. He elbowed the guy behind him in line, some wiry kid from Alabama, and said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear bet. This stew was cooked with motor oil and regret. The group around him chuckled, though some did so cautiously, eyes darting toward the front, where a tall, broad-shouldered woman in a hairnet and apron ladled thick brown slop on 2 plates. Her face unreadable, her eyes focused like she was sculpting battle plans out of gravy. Ethan kept going. He pointed at the grayish chicken breast on the tray ahead and said, "Man, I didn't know we were getting served boot soles today," and that one earned him a few louder laughs. One guy even muttered "damn" under his breath. Then came the moment she looked up. Her eyes were sharp, almost too sharp for someone working kitchen duty. And when they met his, the noise around Ethan seemed to dull. Her gaze locked onto him, not with anger, but with something colder, more calculating, like she had just taken his measure and found him lacking. He grinned back unaffected, or pretending to be, and said something he would soon regret, maybe if the cook spent less time lifting weights and more time seasoning the food. We'd all survive chow time with our taste buds intact. The woman took a slow step forward, her boots landing softly yet firmly on the tile, her ladle still in hand like a weapon disguised as a utensil. She didn't speak, not yet, and the silence that followed seemed to stretch just a little too long for comfort. She scooped a heap of mashed potatoes onto Ethan's tray, her hand steady, her expression unchanged, and then finally she spoke. "Eat up, Private Cole. You'll need the energy. Tomorrow's your first endurance test, isn't it?" He blinked. How did she know his name and his schedule? He hadn't told anyone, not even his squad leader, and something about the way she said it made his smile falter. "Yeah, it is," he said, trying to keep the bravado up, but it came out weaker than before. "You gonna come cheer me on?" She didn't respond, just moved down the line, serving the next recruit as though the moment hadn't happened, but every soldier in earshot felt the shift. The atmosphere had changed, and nobody laughed anymore. Later that day, as the recruits filed out for weapons maintenance, Ethan noticed something strange. A few of the older soldiers, the ones who had been stationed here for a while, gave the cook a wide berth when she passed. They nodded at her respectfully. Even the drill sergeant gave her a look of acknowledgement when she walked by. "Who is she?" Ethan asked one of the guys in his barracks, a tall, quiet dude named Morales who had a scar that ran from his chin to his collarbone. He had seen some stuff, that much was obvious. "You don't know," Morales said. Not looking up from cleaning his rifle, "That's Jackson. She used to be someone before she took the apron. Now she just keeps to herself and cooks for grunts like us. Used to be someone. What the hell does that mean?" Ethan asked, watching Morales closely. Morales finally looked up, his eyes serious like a warning. "She's got more confirmed kills than half the base. Don't ask how. Don't ask where, just know. She didn't always carry a ladle, and anyone who's been here long enough knows not to mess with her." Ethan laughed. "Yeah, right. He said she's just a cook. Probably been on base duty her whole life, making scrambled eggs and pretending she's important." Morales said nothing, just kept cleaning his rifle like he'd already seen how this ended. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. The barracks were quiet, save for the occasional rustle of sheets or the distant echo of boots in the hallway, but his mind kept turning back to her. Those eyes, the calm in her voice, the way she had known his name without asking. He told himself it was nothing, just a weird coincidence. Maybe she had a list. Maybe the staff shared info. Maybe she overheard something, but deep down, something didn't sit right. The next morning came early. The kind of early that made your bones ache, cold air biting through his uniform. As the recruits lined up outside the barracks, ready for the endurance test, a 10-mile run with gear full pack, no shortcuts, and a steep uphill finish, Ethan stretched, bouncing slightly, trying to shake the nervousness he wouldn't admit he had. His squad leader barked orders, and they were off, boots pounding the dirt road, breath steaming in the dawn light, and Ethan felt good for the first 3 miles. By mile 5, he started to fade, the weight digging into his shoulders, legs burning lungs, fighting for air, and that's when he saw her. At the checkpoint near mile 6, standing beside the medical tent holding a clipboard and watching the runners, was Jackson. No apron this time, just a gray hoodie and cargo pants, but the same eyes, cool and unreadable, like they saw through everything. She didn't say a word as he passed, just watched him. And maybe it was in his head, maybe it wasn't, but he swore. She shook her head slightly, like she already knew how this was going to end, and then it happened. His foot caught something, a root, or maybe just bad luck. His body pitched forward and he hit the ground, hard gear slamming into his spine, breath knocked from his lungs, the world spinning around him as he gasped for air. Voices shouted somewhere up the trail, but they felt far away, distant and muffled as he lay there struggling to move. He turned his head and saw her still standing there, still watching. Not moving, not blinking, just staring like she was waiting for something. And that was when he realized something that would change everything. The dirt tasted like metal and failure. Ethan lay face down in the gravel, his body screaming from the impact, and every instinct told him to stay down, to let the medics come to. Let someone else pick him up. But then he heard the footsteps. Not fast, not urgent, just steady and controlled. He rolled onto his back, vision blurred, sunlight stabbing through the canopy, and through the blur, he saw her again. Jackson standing over him, her arms crossed the clipboard, gone, her expression unchanged, as if she were looking at a stubborn stain that refused to come out. "You gonna lie there all day?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy like a quiet engine full of power. Ethan tried to push himself up, arms, trembling legs, dead weight. He managed to sit, his breath, ragged chest heaving, but he was up, and Jackson didn't offer a hand. She just nodded once and turned away, walking back toward the med tent, as if that was the test, and he had barely passed. He finished the run somehow, dragging himself across the finish line long after most of the others had already started cooling down, and as he collapsed on the grass gasping, a shadow fell over him. Psych Ramirez stood over him, arms behind his back, chewing a toothpick, the way he always did when he was annoyed or amused. It was hard to tell which. "You got lucky today, Cole," he said, tapping the brim of his cap. "You don't even know how close you were to screwing it all up. What are you talking about?" Ethan muttered. Wiping sweat from his eyes, Ramirez tilted his head toward the med tent where Jackson stood checking a supply crate. "You think this is about running? You think today was just a test of your legs?" Ethan didn't answer, because he knew he was missing something big. "Let me tell you something about Jackson," Ramirez said, keeping his voice low enough that no one else could hear. "Years ago, before she ever touched a damn ladle, she was a ghost, a name in black, ink on redacted files. She wasn't just Special Forces. She was the one they sent when Special Forces were already bleeding out." "That doesn't make sense," Ethan said, breathless. "She's a cook. She is now," Ramirez said, "and that should scare you more than if she still carried a rifle. People like her, they don't retire. They get put somewhere out of the way where they can keep an eye on things and make sure certain types learn certain lessons." Ethan felt cold, despite the heat soaking through. "His uniform? What do you mean?" "Certain types." Ramirez stared at him with eyes like gunmetal. "You talk too much and you think too little," he said, then turned and walked away, leaving Ethan to wonder what exactly he had walked into. Later that night, the barracks were quieter than usual. Even the usual card game was abandoned. Ethan sat alone on his bunk trying to focus on writing his after-action report, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Jackson, the way she had watched him fall, the way she hadn't moved to help, the way she had expected him to get up. It didn't make sense. No cook should know how to break someone down like that. No mess hall worker should have that kind of presence, the kind that made men twice her size feel like. Children under a microscope. He needed answers, and he needed them now under the cover of night. Ethan slipped out of the barracks hoodie over his head, boots quiet against the pavement. He moved across the base toward the staff building where personnel, files were kept, his heart pounding with every step. It was a stupid idea, and he knew it. But the curiosity was stronger than the fear, stronger than the voice in his head screaming that he'd regret this. The building was dark-locked but not alarmed, and that surprised him. It was almost like they didn't expect anyone to go snooping, and maybe that was the trap. Inside, he moved quickly, navigating by dim emergency lights until he reached the records room, rows of cabinets stretching out like library shelves, the air cold and still. Like the place hadn't been disturbed in days, maybe weeks. He searched under J for Jackson but found nothing, then tried L for Lorraine, still nothing. Finally, he checked a small unmarked drawer near the back, labeled non-active, classified access, restricted, and there he found it, a thin file folder worn at the edges, heavier than it looked when he opened it. The first thing he saw was a photo. Black and white, grainy. A younger version of Jackson in full combat gear crouched beside a chopper, blood on her sleeve. A wounded soldier, on her back. Below the photo were reports, page after page, filled with terms he barely understood. Halo insertions confirmed neutralizations, asset recovery zone extractions. It was a blur of military jargon and kill counts and operation names that were mostly blacked out. One report caught his eye. It mentioned an op in Kandahar, a hostage situation gone bad. Multiple friendly casualties. Jackson was listed as last in, first out, dragging 2 men with gunshot wounds through open fire when questioned. She simply stated the mission wasn't over until everyone was home. He turned the page and stopped cold. The next report detailed a covert rescue operation of a downed intel team, ambushed and surrounded, outnumbered 5-1. Command wanted to pull back. Jackson refused, went in alone, eliminated 3 hostiles with a combat knife, and carried a wounded operative 4 miles to the extraction point, under pursuit. The operative was identified as Leeteek Cole, Marcus. Ren Ethan froze, because Ren was the base commander here. Now the man whose photo hung in the main hallway, the one who everyone saluted without fail, and here he was, barely mentioned in a report where Jackson had saved his life. A creak in the hallway jolted him upright, the file still open in his hands. He shoved it back into the drawer as the footsteps grew louder. Closer, slower. Jackson, no apron, no clipboard, just a black jacket, hands in her pockets and eyes like razors that had already seen where he was hiding before. She stepped foot in the room. "You found it," she said. Not a question. Not surprised, Ethan stepped out slowly, guilty but also confused. Why didn't she sound angry? Why was she calm? "Why are you just a cook?" he asked quietly. "Because I chose to be," she replied. "And because people like you need to learn the hard way what respect really looks like." Then she stepped closer and said something that chilled him deeper than the air in that room. "You think this is about food? Private? It's never about the food." And before he could respond, before he could process what that meant, she walked past him and out the door, leaving him alone in the dark with a truth that wouldn't let him sleep. The morning air was thick with anticipation and tension as Ethan returned to the mess hall, not as a mocking recruit, but as someone carrying the weight of secrets he barely understood, yet could no longer ignore. The room was noisier than usual, voices booming, laughter clinking trays. But underneath all the noise was a quiet current of watchfulness, as if the soldiers sensed a shift, even if they did not know what had changed. Jackson stood behind the counter today, no hairnet, no apron, just a plain black jacket, her presence commanding more respect than any rank. On paper, Ethan caught the way a few men lowered their eyes as she passed, or how whispers stopped mid-sentence. The rumors were spreading faster than fire in dry grass, but no one dared say anything aloud. He grabbed a tray and stood near the wall, feeling the heat of curious stares and the weight of judgment alike. But this time, Ethan did not feel like the smartest guy in the room. Instead, a strange humility settled in his chest, like cold stone grounding him, reminding him that respect was earned, not demanded. Suddenly, the door banged open, and in swaggered Sergeant Ramirez, the same man who had warned Ethan days ago. Ramirez's sharp eyes scanned the room and then landed on Ethan and Jackson standing side by side. He smirked a slow, cruel smile and said, "Well, well, look what we have here. The prodigal trainee who finally found the truth, and the infamous cook who apparently eats more secrets than food." The mess hall went silent as Ramirez's words echoed off the walls, and for a moment Ethan thought a fight was about to break out, but Jackson raised a single finger, calm, and said, "Ramirez, you think this is a joke?" Ramirez laughed like a grating sound scraping against metal. "No, Jackson, you are the joke. A washed-up soldier, hiding behind a spatula, pretending that anyone respects you." Jackson's eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Instead, she stepped forward, and in a voice cold enough to freeze blood said, "You want to talk about respect? Ramirez, ask yourself how many men you've led to their deaths because you thought you were invincible." The room shifted as her words landed heavier than any punch, and Ramirez's smirk faltered just a little. But he was not one to back down. He moved closer to Ethan now and spat, "You should have stayed in the mess hall, kid. This isn't for you." Ethan squared his shoulders and said, "Maybe not, but now I know there's more to this place than I thought, and I'm ready to learn." Ramirez shook his head and left the mess hall, like a storm passing, leaving behind unsettled silence. Jackson turned to Ethan and said, "You have questions, you want answers, but answers come with consequences. Are you ready for that?" Ethan nodded, though inside his heart was pounding like a drum. He was ready, or at least he wanted to be. Later that afternoon, Jackson led Ethan to a room deep within the base. A small sterile space filled with monitors and files, a place where secrets lived and breathed. She sat him down and began to tell stories. Stories of missions that never made the papers, of operations carried out in shadows, where failure meant death and survival was a testament to willpower and grit. She spoke of comrades lost and victories won through sheer determination and sacrifice. Ethan listened, absorbing every word, his respect growing deeper with each story. But what surprised him most was not her past, but her purpose here. Why she chose to serve not on the front lines, but behind the scenes, feeding strength and strategy to the very men who once mocked her, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows through the windows. Ethan realized that the mess hall was not just a place for food, it was a battlefield of its own. A place where reputations were forged and broken, and where Jackson reigned silently. The next morning during a training exercise, Ethan found himself facing a challenge unlike any physical test, a psychological gauntlet designed to break the mind and spirit. He struggled at first, but then remembered Jackson's stories, her calm resolve, her unyielding strength, and something inside him shifted. He pushed through pain and doubt to finish, not first, but with honor and grit. And when he crossed the finish line, Jackson was there, waiting not with praise, but with a simple nod that said, "I see you," back in the barracks. Ethan lay awake, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling shadows dancing as memories of the past days played like a film, and somewhere deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning and that the cook in the mess hall was far more than anyone could have imagined. The day came like a sudden storm without warning or mercy. Ethan stood in formation, the sun beating down relentless heat, wrapping around every man and woman present, sweat slicking skin, and uniforms sticking to flesh. But beneath the fatigue and discomfort was a tense anticipation because today was no ordinary test. Today was the final exercise, a simulation designed to push the limits of mind, body, and spirit, and Jackson was in charge. Her voice came over the loudspeaker, calm, steady, but carrying the weight of command and years of experience behind every word. You will face your fears, your doubts, your weaknesses, and you will overcome or you will fall. Ethan felt his heart hammering like a war drum, but he was ready because he had learned that strength was not just muscle, not just skill, but a fire burning deep inside, fueled by respect for those who led and those who fought beside you. As the challenge unfolded, chaos erupted, smoke flared, obstacles appeared, and every sense screamed danger. But through it all, Jackson's presence was like a beacon cutting through the madness, steady, guiding, watching, judging. And when Ethan faltered, a quiet voice in his head reminded him of her unwavering resolve. The final moments were a blur of exhaustion, pain, and willpower, and when the dust settled, Ethan stood among the few who had finished, and he looked to where Jackson waited, the woman who once was mocked in the showers. Now the commander who had reshaped not just him, but the entire squad. No words were spoken between them, just a look, a nod, and an unspoken understanding that respect had been earned the hard way and that the lesson would never be forgotten. Ethan knew then that mocking was easy, but facing the truth was the true test, and that sometimes the greatest warriors wore aprons, not armor, and led not with arrogance, but with quiet strength.